In business, we often tell ourselves that success is the result of clear strategy, careful planning, and disciplined execution. But the reality is really that simple. The journeys that matter most are often shaped by moments we didn't plan, decisions we didn't fully understand at the time, and encounters that quietly changed direction. In hindsight, those moments begin to form a pattern. But while you live in them, you can feel uncertain, fragmented, and even chaotic. Brandon Zietsman understands that journey well. From leading roles in some of South Africa's top financial institutions to building PortfolioMetrix from the ground up. His story is not just about performance, but about purpose, relationships, and the role of timing in shaping outcomes. Today on Braadcast, we'll explore what it really takes to build something that lasts in a world where not everything can be controlled. Brandon, it's absolutely an honor to have you here on Braadcast, and thank you so much for saying yes and that you would be here. And I just want to welcome you here and say thank you for joining us.
Norman, thank you very much for having me, and I certainly do feel welcome here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so Brandon, we go back a long way. We met you at university and we studied together. We had a little bit of different paths, but it was an incredible time for both of us. It kind of shaped our lives going forward. And I remember those days. But, before university, Brandon, just a little bit about yourself. You've accomplished so much in a very short space of time. And I know that people may say that in your 50s, it's a long time, but you're very young still. And a lot of things have happened in your life. Tell us from the very beginning. You went to St. Stithians School and you did a bit of sport. Tell us what kind of really got you going and took your path into what you studied and where we are today.
Norman, yeah, look, I think I'd have to go back a little bit before Johannesburg. I actually grew up in a tiny little town in KZN called Greytown, not to be confused with Greyton in the Cape. But I enjoy chatting to the youngsters in the business, and they might remember grandparents who had a phone with a dial. It was nommer asseblief, and our number was 528, and that was it. And we were one of the lucky ones because we didn't share a telephone line with the farmers next door. We had our own line. So I think it was a very different world, and I reflect that actually the differences between the 1970s and in Greytown, my dad growing up in the 1940s weren't that massive. And you contrast that to our children today. So yeah, formal influences growing up in a rural area, came to Johannesburg as a 10-year-old, was very surprised when it got to winter and there were soccer posts up and not rugby posts. But I've been in this town now since 1980, so I'm a naturalized citizen of Johannesburg.
And what did your parents do there? Were they farming?
So my dad was involved in agriculture. So he was involved in the seed business. So it ultimately Pioneer became Pannar, and then for much of his career was agricultural chemicals, so herbicides, pesticides, buffers, all of that kind of stuff. So there's certainly finance doesn't run in the family. This is the first generation that stepped out into that world.
And you came here at 9 years old. You're 1980. You arrived in Johannesburg. Yeah. And you ended up in the northern suburbs of Bryanston and went to St. Stithians.
That's correct.
Okay, so tell me, during your time at St. Stithians, you played sport, you were very competitive, and I think you had a sibling, we all know Kim, and also very competitive, and you did well at school. During that time, anything that stood out, and what do you think made you decide to want to go into finance? Or you were obviously very bright.
Obviously, but
the results, what you achieved at school and university, I remember sitting next to you the one time, and I didn't have a good result in my stats. I looked over across to you. I think you achieved 110% for an exam, and I was trying to work out how can you get more than 100%. You said, well, they do subtract marks, and it's the way they mark.
Well, you've clearly got a better memory than I do, Norman. So I think when I was at school, I had a very different career path in mind. I've been fascinated with airplanes and flying from a little boy, and I guess, the passions, we express it in our preferences and how people perceive us. And certainly the conversation I had with our career guidance chap at school, and he said, whatever you do, just stay away from commerce. Don't try and run a business, and whatever you do, don't sit behind a desk, because you will almost certainly fail. So I confounded that a little bit, and managed to do a fair amount of flying and aviation for recreational purposes later.
But you got your license very young.
Youngish, yeah.
And tell me, you did 2 degrees. I mean, you did a law and you did a finance accounting degree, at if I remember.
At Wits?
Yeah.
You'll remember we had, I think you had 3 choices, if I recall. So you could either do a general commerce undergrad, or you could go the legal route, and then you could do an LLB, or you could go the accounting route, and you did your CA. And I had no idea which one of the 2 I wanted to be. So I managed to get permission from the faculty to run the law and accounting side by side, to give myself the options. And as it happened, when I got to the end of it, I chose neither. So that's how it works out, yeah.
So, and then obviously, I mean, you did exceptionally well, and you graduated there, and it was a career journey and a path for you now that you I don't think, were you sure where you wanted to go, or did you just, I mean, your first job was at Investec. Did you know exactly where you wanted to go? You just were interested in numbers and finance and investments?
So look, I had, back in those days, 2 years in the national service in the Air Force first. That was actually quite an interesting journey. It wasn't as much a waste of time as one imagines. There's some really interesting stuff. And I think some things that, I may have carried forward. I think that with the passage of time, normally say 55, everything feels compressed, but through other people's lenses, it's a very long time. And I think that there are things that, in that period of time and leadership positions maybe have formed a little bit, or had some role in forming how I think about things, particularly on the leadership side. But I don't know. Finance was an exciting place. I mean, if you go and look at points of inflection and go and let's think about what we're talking about, the early 1990s, and go and have a look at the evolution of fields like asset management, fields like corporate finance, the structuring side, the birth of the derivatives market in South Africa. So there was a lot at that time that was really, really nascent, and there was an enormous amount that was in flux. There was an opportunity to develop expertise in areas where very little existed. Now, normally we have to follow a hierarchy of things. There's a seniority out there, people who've been doing things for 10, 15 years. And they're genuinely, it was also the point where computing had just come in. So, I mean, 5 years before you and I started working, people didn't have PCs on their desk. 3 years later, we all had cell phones in our hands. So there was a lot in flux, and it presented enormous opportunity for us. And to a certain degree, it hasn't really been replicated since then. I can't think of any other period in the last 30 years when you could have come in as youngsters in your early 20s and carved out paths in quite the same way as we were able to do. Not that is going to hold true for the next 5 years, obviously. They're very exciting times.
You started your first job, and you were learning, you were absorbing, and you were grasping everything. That was in the corporate world. I mean, that's what you come as a youngster, you're fresh out of varsity, and you've paid your dues, and now you've got to take orders. But I'm saying the people around you, some role models that you looked up to there in the really early stages of investments and things like that you took away from, or was there this real hierarchy of saying, you just listen, learn, and keep quiet and watch what we do, and you don't change the model? Or I'm trying to eventually find out how you got into your own business. I mean, those first early stages of learning.
I also think those corporates, when we say corporates, you're talking about the likes of Investec and RMB, were very, very different back in the day. And I sort of reflect on, what an understanding now would be of a big corporate. I mean, these in many respects were also businesses in the very early phase of their evolution. So from my alma mater, I'd sort of like to think was more sort of the RMB asset management space where I spent more time. But what I do recall is there being an enormous amount of latitude to invent and create. And if I reflect on it now as a youngster, the number of suggestions that I came up and almost creating your own jobs and sort of saying, listen, I think there is a gap, an opportunity, I would like to do it. And if I think about it now and I think about the age we were at that time, it feels a bit outrageous. But I do feel that it felt that there was enough fluidity in those businesses and less perhaps formality that you will see today, that if you asked for it, you had a very, very good chance of getting those opportunities.
I suppose they were also in their learning phase and design phase of themselves. They were trying to create something for themselves and they weren't sure where to go. And young people like yourselves that had a clever mind on on them, they could kind of take them into certain directions. But today, I mean, I can tell you in the corporate world, I've got a lot of friends there and they like stifled at what they can do, and the decisions they can make and the boards and the executive meetings and all these things that they've got to go through just to make one little decision. They kind of lost it seems like they've lost their flexibility or the entrepreneurship.
As you sort of advance through time, you accumulate stuff. So there are ideas that worked and
cultures that are created.
Yeah, well, I think one's got to be very careful about DNA. People talk about our culture, our DNA. Now, I mean, what we must remember is DNA in the wild evolves, and evolution is a function of flux. And also, you get evolutionary dead ends. But I think one of the challenges is to keep revisiting things. There's a why at some point. There's a reason you did things, and it's based on an environment, a context, circumstances that was valid at that point in time. And the landscape drifts, and your position on the landscape drifts, but you don't find necessarily that context is revisited frequently enough. And I think one of the challenges you get is as you get bigger, your decision making is delegated, which it should be. That's why you've got it. You've got delegation systems. You should be delegating authority. But what you're also doing simultaneously is you are distributing the responsibility for almost your creative thinking, your strategic thinking. Now, that equally should be good because you shouldn't have a situation where it's all concentrated in the minds of two or three individuals. But the challenge then becomes one of alignment. And it is not as easy as you'd imagine when you've got pockets of deep specialization that are focused on projects and very specific deliverables to actually create that sort of step out of that picture, just step away from your day job, think expansively, think broadly, don't do anything, just sit at your desk, you're just staring at the wall type stuff. That isn't like behavior that is rewarded. We reward busyness, we reward activity. So you can actually get organizations that are, from the outside, incredibly busy. The execution is brilliant, it's highly professional. But at the end of the day, the needle is just not moving. And part of that problem is that there may be a very, very clear grasp of concept at the outset and vision. And what you have over time is that those ideas become stale. And you just slowly start slipping backwards, and it's harder and harder to always regain your traction. I think that's what happens in some of the bigger.
No, most importantly, one of the things that you've just mentioned, you can't be too concentrated on one or two personalities within the business to carry you through, because the model that I think all the big corporate or big companies, that they can't try and create something that no matter who leaves and no matter who's not at the helm, that the business will continue and will carry on and will grow exponentially with or without anyone that seems to be dispensable at the time. And I think that's what you've done and you've created. But your first job, I mean, you left. There was a decision to leave and to go from Investec, I think, then to RMB. There was a decision process. I mean, I'm just trying to get into your mind because there was a growth of Brandon along the way. You got approached by them to leave, and how did that decision process happen? And because you are a loyal guy, you're a solid human being. You're not someone that will just do something and then just leave. And so, I mean, what made you make those decisions? And I know certainly knowing you, it wasn't financial.
Yeah, no. So I think it was just it was a little bit circumstantial. I learned a lot. In fact, the one thing in hindsight that I'm very glad, you talked about academics earlier. So most of the things that I ultimately studied, I ended up doing after that undergrad, and a lot of them sort of part-time and what have you. But I'm very grateful that my career started young enough and at a sufficiently junior level that you're able to do a lot of junior work. And what I think was particularly important was the client-facing stuff, because a lot of us end up going down technical tunnels, and at various points in my career, I was stuck behind spreadsheets and building models. But those client engagements, and particularly, I think from a let's just call it what is it? It's sales, it's deal making. You can be sitting there with all the raw potential in the world, but if you have no ability to take people on the journey with you, no ability to be persuasive, no ability to take the things that you've got in your head and share that with people and bring them along, you're going to find a challenge. And I think one of the things that was very liberating for me was right in the beginning to get that out of the way, where you had no choice but to engage with people and take them along with you. But going to RMB, it was just exciting. They'd set up RMB Asset Management. There were opportunities there that were quite specific to the roles that were available. And I was also able, within a relatively short period of time to advance what I was doing, going in and running the product development side. It was nascent at the time, the equity derivative space. The opportunity existed then to actually invent stuff, to come up with stuff that had never seen the light of day anywhere in the world before. And for me, I absolutely loved that time. And if I could recreate that Petri dish for every single youngster, I mean, it would literally be the path I would.
I'm not going to put you on the spot, so maybe I'll ask you this question afterwards. But after RMB, you were there for a number of years, and then you went to, I think, Citibank, and you head up the big division. Oh, I think there was something. Barclays. And tell me, there was another decision in your life that you had to make.
Yes, so at that point when I left there, I was what was then the CEO of RMB Unit Trust. The culture that we sort of built there is not that dissimilar to what we have at PortfolioMetrix now. And I guess I probably had my biggest learning, or this wake-up call, and I realized that sometimes even with your best efforts, you're going to lose.
Meaning, explain that a little bit.
We sort of felt that if your ideas came from the right place, right? So let's just almost call it the integrity of the ideas. If you spent enough time thinking about how to formulate them, and you were sufficiently sort of almost confident to put across that the best ideas would prevail. And I actually learned at a point of inflection there, and this was post-financial crisis. I think I left there in 2008. Is that wasn't always going to be the case, that sometimes the world is just much bigger than you. It's just much bigger than you. And just getting used to that sort of the idea that there's only so much you can control, and there's certain things that is going to happen. Now, you can be cocky and arrogant and say you should just try harder, be whatever. But the reality is that, there were unfortunately some big strategic calls that were made that ultimately derailed that business. It was at a group level, at a high level. And I left there because I didn't want to be there when it happened. I mean, I think the whole story, that business didn't continue to thrive, the same way as some of the other asset managers. And so the challenge at the time was I knew where I didn't want to be, but I didn't know where I wanted to be. At a fairly early part of my career, I said, look, I want to be out of corporate by the time I'm 40.
But I'm saying, if you had stayed in corporate, I mean, you could have, I'm not trying to create something that wasn't there, but you had all the credentials and you had all the qualifications to possibly one day lead a bank and run a bank or run a big investment fund, whatever, Sanlam or whatever you want to mention. But you made a strategic call that you didn't want to be in the corporate world. You wanted to have your own business. When did you know that?
I knew I wanted that very, very early on. So as I said, there was this kind of idea, like whatever happens, by the time I'm 40, I need to be out and doing my own thing. But I think there's also a little bit of introspection there, Norman. I also realized that temperament-wise, that ultimately I was going to be running into some challenges there. When you've got some sort of fairly strong views and you've got a bit of conviction that is, not the right way to go. And at some point, you're going to say, well, okay, I lost that argument. We're going that way anyway. Or you sort of say, well, I'd rather be in a position where I can avoid finding myself in a place where I don't want to just tag along with something I'm not on board with. And I realized the only way in which that was going to happen was to go and create something from scratch.
Did you know when you that was what you created today was what you were going to create, or was it kind of an idea and it evolved through maybe you were working around with people at the time and said, there's a niche or a need in the market which we can create? Because it's quite interesting. You run the fund now, PortfolioMetrix, which is around 100 billion under management. And interestingly enough, it's taken you 10, 12 years. So, correct me if I'm wrong, you can stop me anytime you want, to get to that size where some of these larger investment institutions are at 500-600 billion, and they've been doing it for 40, 50 years, So in a very short space of time, you've grown exponentially well and large, and yet it's still a small business. It's an amazingly small little business by, I think about 50 people or 40 people that are working within your company. So did you have that exact idea, or did it evolve?
So look, it's been 16 years, 120 billion, 75 employees, which, as you said, is still relatively
very small.
But it's also a function of the model of the business. So Norman, I think, look, I don't know that one has these exact pictures. You have ideas, you've got a sense of purpose, you've got a sense of.
It looks easier afterwards.
It also looks to outside observers, it looks preordained. It looks like that path was always going to be walked. And it's quite simply not true. There's a lot of randomness in the world. There's a lot of serendipity. There's good luck and there's bad luck. We do have a lot of control over when the universe throws things at you, what you do about it. So, you can't go and create a linear strategy that 100% is going to play out, because there will be lumps and bumps, but each one of those, to a certain degree, represents an opportunity. So no, if you'd asked me what is the exact shape, I wouldn't have been able to describe it precisely. But what I could have described very precisely is what the gaps were. Now, there are 1,000,001 things that could have happened that might have stood in the way of those strategies playing out. It could have gone differently. And sometimes a wave just builds behind you and it's got nothing to do with you. You just happen to be surfing in the right part of the ocean. But, I think at the time, you've got, and we've all been there, you've been there. What are your near-term, objectives? You want to get to profitability. You want to get out of the, red. And I think that compounds over time. When you're playing, when you've got the energy, you've got the thinking, opportunities will keep on growing. Now, the challenge we've got, obviously, is how you change those gears, because you're always going to run out of runway. So it is literally like gears. You get to first gear, you're at the top of it, it's revving, the gearbox is falling apart, unless you find another gear. And you change that gear, and in the beginning it's a bit slow, it drags a little bit, then you hit peak revs. And I think that
that's a good analogy.
The risk is that you don't get that gear change. And the worst is if your gearbox tears itself to pieces, or you just end up going down to Durban in second gear, which is not.
The team that you started with from the very beginning, are there still some of them with you today?
No, so our founding team, I'm the only remaining person who's active in the business. But they're an absolutely phenomenal team. And I think there's a saying, or someone said to me, I remember, the team that gets you from 1 to 10 is different to the team that will get you from 10 to 100. And that, again, will be different from the team that takes you from 100 to 1,000. If you think about those early days of any business, what do you value? You value multitasking, really, really smart people who can juggle 10 balls, where they can all do 5 jobs. But ultimately, you're going to have to find people that are good at building systems of delegation, people who are good at building specialized systems. So you'll just almost find that over time there is a natural evolution of the cross-section of your leadership in a business.
Did you have money to start? Did you have to put a lot of money into your business to start, or was the team small enough that you could handle, that it could navigate? Obviously you started this business and you went out to look who was going to invest and back you and support you. You'll remember who the first person is that invested a large lump sum into you, behind you. But I'm saying, did you need money in the beginning or not really?
Less than we imagined. So, I mean, I had a war chest that was reserved for the business and didn't really have to dig in. We were very fortunate. So the little gap, the filler between my time at R&B and PortfolioMetrix was with Barclays. And I actually I learned a lot in that time there because it was a lot more corporatized. I was head of the investment and product office. So I believe we built some durable stuff, but actually after leaving there, we continued to provide services to the ABSA group, which I thought was going to be
really
6 months, if we were lucky. But we actually continued for another 2 years. So we had, fortunately, sources of revenue during a period of time when you'd otherwise just be in building phase. And we did some other sort of strategic consulting work at the same time. So it wasn't really necessary to dig deeply into the war chest, and fortunately we're in a position where the founders, it wasn't necessary that we drew massive, and you cost conscious. It's your own money, right? So you don't go and buy a flashy corporate office. You do what you go and take your granny flat at home and you put a computer in there and you start.
Well, everyone starts there, and everyone starts somewhere, and that's part of the journey and the beautiful thing of knowing where you've come from and where you are, and the value of money and the value of appreciating how to make a rand. And you mentioned, and I keep bringing this up because it's something that's like really resonates with me. And did you think that in the first few years, did you think that you'd achieve so much so quickly? Because there's a saying, and I've mentioned this before in a previous podcast, is that you sometimes overestimate short-term results and you underestimate long-term achievements, and results which you're trying to plan for. Did you think that you would do far more better in the beginning, or were you a lot more conservative in your approach and your mindset?
I think it's quite interesting what you're asking. There's actually two questions in there, and I'll maybe answer them separately. So one is, I think we all do this, where you look at something that is genuinely difficult, and subjectively you're judging the effort correctly, and you'll see it when people go and ride the Cape Epic or go and ride a mountain. In the preparation phase, it looks big. As soon as it's behind you, we tend to trivialize it. You give yourself one pat on the back, and then you move on. I think we all do that. But in terms of almost that startup, like what do you think you can do? Let's call it anxiety, confidence, pessimism, optimism. I definitely, in hindsight, I think I underestimated the challenges. Yeah, I definitely think I was carrying more confidence than was warranted.
Well, that's what I said. That's why the saying is so great. You overestimate what you're going to achieve, and you underestimate the challenges.
Absolutely. So, I mean, if you think about it, investment management is a confidence business. I mean, for you to go and you've built this business and you're going to give your money to us to manage, right? I mean, it's the degree of, and it's not even trust from an integrity point of view. It's confidence. And you start a business in the investment world where you've got no investment track record. You've got hardly any resources. You have no other clients who are able to sort of go and give you a little bit of vindication that this works. And yet you believe that what you're offering is compelling enough that the people you're talking to should take it. If I go and reverse the situation, I think about those great businesses that we are talking to that have equally been built over 15, 20, 30 and more years. And the trust and confidence they placed on us, in hindsight, just seems unreasonable. I mean, it's so much easier for people to make that decision now because they can look back, they can verify, it's vindicated.
Credibility.
It's there, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think about that first generation of the, the big wealth management firms and the independent financial advisors who supported the business. And in hindsight, I believe they were very bold.
But you must have had some great salespeople in your team. And again, I just want to clear this up again for the viewers to try and understand a bit more about your business. We've had this conversation. I asked you one day, I sat in your office and I said, Brandon, what share should I invest in? You said, you've never looked at a share. You haven't seen a share. You haven't invested in a share in years. You wouldn't even know what a share price was. And I said, but that's what you do. He said, yeah, but that's not how our business does. Because we met you, you were trying to explain to me about your business. And I think it's good for the viewers that Your business is not investing in shares. Your business is investing in teams and management and asset management teams that invest in shares. And that decision-making process of who to pick and who to back and who to put your client's money in which metrics or consortium of investors was the decision-making process that you were going about, just for clarity purposes. Now that in itself needed a lot of kind of studying, analyzing the teams that were behind the business. What were some of those decisions of who were you going to invest in, which asset management company that you were going to put your money behind?
Okay, can I take it back a step?
Sure.
So I think that because this, I can tie it back to that question. You come into a market that is mature. I mean, there's nothing sort of new about asset management. The incumbents were very well entrenched. The products out there that were being well supported had been in place for a while. So to go and sort of say, well, how do you go and take a mature industry with a lot of very clever people out there?
And do it better.
Never ever assume that you've got cleverness as an advantage. There are a lot of clever people out there. So you've almost got to start finding chinks in the armor somewhere. Now, the first one, funny enough, wasn't in terms of how you manage money. That was the second one. The first one is like the changes normally happen elsewhere in the system. So if I go and look at the evolution of investment management over the 90s and 2000s, your proximal thing that you think is real change is how many funds are out there, how many asset managers, but why did it change? And normally the flux happens elsewhere in the system. Now, where it was happening in the system at the time is financial advice had gone from something that was very basic. It was broking, it was earning commissions, getting all your money up front. It was all about sales, fire and forget. And that's what it was. And then a few things happened in the industry that you had to keep an eye on and saying, hold on a second. That is facilitating this. We've got this rapidly emerging profession of financial advice. And the reason it's going to keep on evolving is because of these positive feedback loops. But what's going to change if advisors become now super professionalized, it becomes a proper profession? Are they going to be consuming product in the same way, or are they looking for something different? And that was our first thing, is that the distribution paradigm needed to move away from products and it needed to go to solutions. We needed to go away from this idea of wide area distribution, and we need to focus on strategic relationships that were more holistic and less transactional. So that was the first thing. We saw that there was a problem in terms of how investment services were being taken to the market. But you're quite right. So we had to look at how people were investing, because that's ultimately what we do. Now, if everyone's absolutely nailed it, then there's no opportunity for you to do anything different. So I think the first one was that what was dominant in the world? The dominance in the world was big asset managers that were, as you said, buying and selling shares, buying and selling bonds, and then concocting these multi-asset portfolios that you go into. The world was evolving. South Africa was breaking. It was becoming more global. There were more asset classes. There was more complexity.
You could invest overseas.
You could invest overseas. I mean, and you get to a point right now, and you're sort of saying, well, how do you actually manage to handle that degree of complexity, that degree of specialization? And I've got to go and hire those people and put them all in my office, right? And I've got to pay their salaries. And if they're not performing, I'm going to have discussions with them. And it just became increasingly improbable to me that is the future of how we're going to manage money. So, for example, we talk about investing. When we say investing, outsourcing certain parts of the portfolio. We had, for example, emerging European equities. Now, you think these shares are in Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic. How do you, if you're sitting in New York or Cape Town, if you're going to ask a manager in Cape Town, just list 30 companies in that region, that will be a challenge. But you go and find a firm of very, very smart guys sitting in Estonia, in the town of Tallinn, the capital city, who speak the region's languages, are all qualified CFAs with 20 years of experience. They jump on a plane, a bus, and they go and walk those factory floors, and they cover 800 companies. And the more I thought about this, it was actually, the world is going to change. The weather is going to change. The wind is going to change. We're going to be managing money differently. The second one was, people, when you're running stuff from the bottom up, actually the top level becomes incidental. You worry about this share, that share, financial sector, should we be in Platts? And ultimately, your portfolio at the top level just kind of emerges. It's like consequential. It's less deliberate. And I said, I think we need to do this differently, where the key thing that we need to do is architect it from the top down. Because the stuff at the bottom is like ingredients. If you think about the top level, that's almost like your dining experience. That's like at the top level. That we needed to develop expertise. And I said, guys, we've moved beyond a world of investing being art and science. You've heard that. Is investing art or science? Well, it's neither, right? Engineering is a better metaphor because engineering solves a problem. Like you come and tell me this is the problem that needs to be solved, and we need to engineer solutions. And of course, what does good engineering include? Science, right? Engineering doesn't exist in the absence of science. And I'd always sort of say that things are well engineered tend to be quite pretty. There's a bit of art, it reveals art. But I think that was just seeing things differently, that we abandoned the crystal balls. We abandoned trying to predict what was going to happen to the Rand in 6 months. We don't try and second guess what's going to happen in the next week in Iran or where the trade wars are going. But largely that you now engineer portfolios for a very wide range of possible scenarios. I don't want to wake up in the morning and read the news and actually just have my heart sink and think, oh, geez, we've got this completely wrong. Like we're in trouble now. Yeah. I want to know that a lot of stuff can happen in the world and our portfolios will be broadly robust.
I'm not going to mention any names, but I've invested with some brokers along the way, along our journey, the little money that I've made, and try to invest it in stocks, some predominantly long in property, and we'll get to that conversation just now. But there was one particular broker, and I said to them, listen, I think I'm going to take the little investment that I'm going to give it to Brandon, because I think what he's doing, I'm not even sure, kind of at the time, I wasn't even kind of sure exactly what you were doing, but I just knew that you were doing something different. And they said, no, you can't do that because it's very conservative. And the numbers and the returns are not, you've got to invest in like stocks that are going to go the wave and outperform the market and the 3 or 4% above inflation and all these things that they were telling me. I'll tell you now, I said back, they were great salespeople because I ended up giving them money, and the better the salespeople, that they got my money. But looking back now, and the product has outlasted and outsurvived any of those brokers, and it's performed year on year and it's done well. That in itself, what you've created, those brokers that spoke to me at the time are now investing their clients' money with you, which is a feather in your cap, So I think you can be proud of that, to know that what you've created is, exceeded expectations from your competitors.
So I think, the world has changed, and I think the paradigm that we were challenging at the time is that, investing and to even legitimately charge a fee, you had to have high conviction, concentrated portfolios. And it's almost the equivalent of trying to hit a 6 off every ball. Let's pretend the game is 5-day test cricket, and you go out there and you try and hit a boundary off every ball. The truth is, in investing, I'd actually almost like digress and say there's a psychological element to this as well. Norman, you know what it's like when you've got a portfolio that is not performing, and the stresses that it puts under you, and it doesn't matter how much conviction that you got that you must just stay invested. Eventually you get to a point of pain where you just can't handle it anymore and you're going to do something. And there are a couple of guys back in the 1970s who did a behavioral thing that's called prospect theory. And it's actually been it was a seminal piece that, and what they showed is that people actually feel the pain of losses twice as much as they experience the happiness of gains. Now, that would mean nothing more than just, okay, that's interesting, but for what it results in. So if you're feeling pain more often every single time your portfolio is lagging than your happiness, it's going to create stresses, and ultimately that stress manifests in behavior. And that behavior is to switch in and out of things at exactly the wrong time. So what you find is investors' portfolios actually doing worse than what's available out there. If you just stayed invested, you could have done a lot better. So I think the one thing that we realized is that it's not just good enough for us to generate top returns, but we need to create a client journey that we keep the guys on board. So if we create flying, too much turbulence and everyone is airsick and they're throwing up and they jump out the plane, that actually doesn't achieve the objective. So if we look at it from that cricketing analogy, so the approach is you take your ones and take your twos and try not to lose your wickets. But what we managed to show over the last 15 years is that taking the ones and twos win the match.
Great analogy, because my daughter plays golf, and I try and explain to her in the beginning, you got to be super concentrated on the first few holes, because every shot doesn't affect you in that hole. You make a bogey in the first few 3, 4 holes. If you make 2, they don't affect you then. They affect you at the end.
Yeah.
When you add your score up in the 18th hole, that bogey in the beginning hurts your score. So it's the same analogy.
That bogey improves my score a lot, by the way, just as an aside. But no, I think it's right. But I mean, you don't have to wait incredibly long. I mean, if you sort of literally if you imagine like every quarter, and the place you sit is just in the second quartile, a bit above, over 5 years, even shorter, 3 years, right? You'll be sitting in the top quartile. If you carry that a little bit longer, you're going to be right near the top. So it actually, it's not like you have to hang around for 20 years to get it. It's just that taking lots of smaller, the word alpha. Alpha is just that extra return. A lot of smaller bits is better than big chunky stuff. The big chunky stuff can reverse as quickly as you got it. So you can be, top of the tables for 3 years, but when it goes the other way, you are right at the bottom. You lose your investors; they lose their money, and it's an
appreciation of 50%. You got to make 100% growth to get back. So I mean, that's just so. And then tell me, I mean, you're looking back. I mean, you've created this portfolio, and we're looking back. Who are the most instrumental people that you learned from along the way?
I don't know if there was necessarily like a
standout
mentor. I could have a long list of people that I learned an enormous amount from in different capacities at different phases. So the positive side is you meet remarkable people on the way and you learn from them. But, sometimes I'm a positive person, but I always think that when if you want to be as objective as possible, you need to look at all the negative outcomes as much as you look at the positive to have a really good sense of objectively where to go. And I think that I think I must think about this for a moment, but I think I probably learned more of what not to do. So I think that you could almost go and take a lot of people that I earned lots of little things from, but I also just saw how big mistakes can sink it. And it's almost like, betting the farm and stuff. Just failure to think things out properly. There's a robustness, there's a robustness to thinking. We should never, ever cut corners. Norman, I'll tell you, if there's one thing that people say, like, geez, Brandon's repetitive at the office, and I say to the youngsters, and there's an Afrikaans saying, which I love, hoe meer haast, hoe minder spoed. Okay.
Yes.
So basically, the more haste, the less speed, rushing things. The English equivalent would be, go slow to go fast. And I think if I look at all the big mistakes I've seen out there and said, don't make that again, is rushing your thinking.
Yeah.
Rushing your thinking and not considering all the possible things that could go wrong as much as we consider all the possible things that we hope are going to go right.
Was there ever a stage in your, I mean, I know the way you've explained it, that you've been quite conservative and resilient to downturns, but was there a time or a stage in that space where you thought, we were actually long here, we were long there, we made one or two of the wrong decisions, this could hurt us reputation-wise?
No, but I also wouldn't say we're conservative. I mean, it all depends on perspective, right? So what we are is very, very consistent. Yeah. So if, for example, markets are absolutely flying and everyone's risk appetite is, out the window, it'll look like we're being conservative. But equally, there'll be times when markets are crashing and the world is falling apart where we look very aggressive. The guys will look and say, but geez, PortfolioMetrix has not dumped their risk assets. In fact, as they're falling, we're buying them. We got to COVID and things were tanking. We were very, very busy. We were buying stuff. I guess it's perspective. Over the fullness of time, you more or less you're maintaining your heading. And depending on where the rest of the herd is running, it may look like we're being more aggressive or less aggressive. And we don't worry about that too much.
And looking back, do you think there were times when you could have been more aggressive and regret that you didn't take like a bit more of an aggressive approach?
No, because if you think about what we're doing is we're building portfolios that are true to a mandate, and we get a risk mandate. Now, if you kind of think about risk as budget, okay, so risk is like, what is risk actually? It's uncertainty. So if I say, Norman, I'm going to offer you 1,000 Rand a year from now, definitely, or 1,000 Rand a year, maybe. Now, unless you're a complete idiot, you take the definitely, right? Then I come to you and I say, Norman, I'm going to offer you $1,200 a year from now, maybe. As an intelligent guy, your next question to me is, okay, how much maybe is maybe? So what we're doing is we are spending your uncertainty. How much uncertainty are you comfortable with? And how much can we squeeze out of that risk that you give us? So when we run portfolios, they are pretty clinical. you've given us a mandate to take on a certain amount of risk. We are not going to unilaterally go and add a whole dollop of risk on it. And equally, we're not going to go and take it away. Where you come to me and say, Brandon, what happened, man? The market's done so frigging well, but you guys have lagged. And I say, well, Norms, we didn't have quite the same conviction as you, so we're actually sitting on a pile of cash. That's not how we do stuff. We'll say, listen, this is the cost, the risk, the uncertainty that you're prepared to take, and we will do everything within our capability to do as well as we can based on that budget you've given us.
So, a lot of other asset management companies, they ask you a couple of questions, your risk appetite, and do you want to be aggressive, do you want to be discretionary, and those kind of questions that come to the table. Not many questions, and just want the money and they want to invest it, and this is the fee. Whether you win or lose or make or their fee is still there. You go through a different process of analyzing the risk appetite. You kind of almost give them a questionnaire where it actually it kind of explains, it's almost like a psychometric test analysis of the person and where you are in the stage of your life, if you're in your 30s, 40s or 50s or just about to retire. Just explain to you that there's a whole science behind that, and then that's an expensive investment that you make, but you get that right. That's actually the underlying belly of your investment strategy for the client.
So bear in mind, we have very little interaction with end clients. So apart from friends and family and what have you, we work with top wealth managers and advisors. So we've recognized that
but they do that.
Yeah. So we give tools. So we can talk. The psychometric tools you mentioned. I can unpack that a little bit. But it is actually almost this coalition of top advisors. These are guys who are not only at the top of their game in South Africa. Because as you know, we've got the UK business that's been going since 2012. It's like half of our assets, but working with top advisors in those jurisdictions. And these guys are exceptionally well qualified and experienced at what they do. So we don't pretend to second guess that we understand the preferences of the client, their circumstances, etc. So what we will do is we will run assets based on how they have profiled. What we give is tools, and you talk about psychometric tools. So we have a thing that we developed called the Financial Personality Assessment. And we're actually astounded to discover a couple of years ago, it voted as the best risk profiling service in the United Kingdom. And I thought, oh, geez, the companies who do this for a living, and we did this as something on the side. But it was an absolutely fascinating process going through developing these psychometrics. Because what we do is we put that in the hands of the advisor. We're not dealing with the client. And what those questionnaires yield for a good advisor is either just confirming, maybe 8 out of 10 times, confirming your intuition, your experience is telling you that. But every so often it'll challenge that. Say, geez, I'm sitting opposite this guy's a mountaineer, a skydiver, or whatever it is. But actually their financial personality is a lot more conservative. And you'll see this with entrepreneurs who take an enormous amount of risk in building their businesses. But once they've built up that asset base, actually might be very conservative investors. So you've got tools that we can give top advisors where it will either confirm or challenge their intuition, and will give them a little bit of a profile and sort of say, listen, if those news headlines look like that, if that investment statement comes and there's a hole in it based on the last month, these are your clients that are going to be particularly anxious. These are the guys who are going to be risk avoiding. I think the big one, these are the guys who are most likely to want to make a decision to deviate from their strategy. And it's a fun side that you don't normally associate with the science of investing or the engineering of investing.
You've answered most of the stuff I wanted to ask you now, but I'm saying you don't believe in investing in any individual shares for an individual, or do you think you just invest in possibly with your asset management company a bit more aggressive strategy? Is that what you would say, or do you think there could be a balance? Because there's also the other side. There's also property, and there's other kind of investment assets.
Look, a lot of guys, you will invest in shares because it's fun, right? So it actually engages you in the market. It's got you reading the newspaper and what have you. But if I go and take some of the best investment managers in the world, and I'd like to believe we deal with those, for them just to beat their benchmark consistently by a little bit after they've charged their fees is actually more of an achievement than you'd imagine. So to be a private individual or an individual broker, what have you, where you're going and specifically picking stocks based on what you
Got
read in the newspaper or you saw on the screen. Bear in mind, everyone else can see that screen. The whole industry can see the screen. So it requires an information asymmetry that doesn't exist in the world. It's going to give you, over time, very random results. And even worse, if you get it right 3 times in a row, now you really believe you've got the secret sauce until you. So no, I mean, of course, I mean, picking, we're investing in people who are very, very good at selecting stocks. Would I, after 30 something years and, would I do that myself for my own portfolio? No.
I wanted to ask you, have you ever made a mistake?
You make plenty of mistakes. And you got to be comfortable that those mistakes are not they're not a reflection that your company is terrible. It means that you're learning and you're consistently learning. I mean, we've had times where we thought we had more diversification in the portfolio than we actually had. Something happened. We sort of a little bit surprised. He said, that's not quite what we expected. And then you've got to go and think. And you're going to say, let's think before we go and do all the numbers and crunch it. What do we think didn't work as well as we had hoped? And then go and try and confirm it. Now, I mean, I'm absolutely convinced over the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, we're going to learn lots more. But I think you've got to also be very, very careful. I mean, people tend to celebrate without thinking about it when you do very well, and then woe is me when you do less well or badly even. But sometimes you got to be careful when you do very well. When you're winning awards and out there, before you just slap yourself on the back and, everyone's celebrating, popping champagne. So to say, well, are we comfortable that we fully understand why we did so well? Maybe our portfolios are pregnant with a risk that we should be concerned about. What if that risk reverses? What if, 6 months you're sitting down at the bottom of that fourth quartile? So I think that you've got to stay humble. You've got to be very, very realistic about what is knowable and what's knowable. So I can't say that there's been anything where I literally look back and say, geez, that was a massive mistake. But I can say that there are enough of them that come almost like continuously in any given year. There's something that you're going to improve because you've...
Tell me, do you feel there's any threat, challenges with regards to AI? And you go into ChatGPT or any one of these, and you ask them to give you the top 10 stocks, and they'll give you some information. They'll say this is not advice and it's not telling you to. But I'm saying, surely they must have a role in the industry that it's playing. I mean, it's accumulating all information and all these algorithms that is giving us information which is the best performing and shares.
Yeah. So I mean, if you ask Claude or ChatGPT, what's looking cheap and expensive, you're on a hiding to nowhere. But in the asset management world, what it can do is allow for a much more rapid assimilation of data and information, and can be more exhaustive, and that information gets into the system quicker. So what that actually does is it creates more efficiency. Now, efficiency sounds like a good thing if it's a car. It's not necessarily a good thing if you're an active manager and you're trying to beat the market, because it means that all that information gets into your sort of decision-making quicker. But I think that what that means, I mean, I think there are limits to the ability of AI to just like literally get rid of opportunities. Certainly there's enough randomness in the world that, any linear sort of thinking, whether it's from AI or human beings, will be torpedoed from things that you can't foresee. I mean, the only thing you can foresee is something's going to sink your hypothesis, right? So I think that with AI in particular, what it emphasizes, and I think this is where our heritage comes from, is that top-down engineering, literally constructing the portfolio in the same way as you would sort of say, listen, I'm going to build an airplane, but is it a fighter plane? Is it a transport plane? Is it a helicopter? All right, that's the mission. Let's go and build it. I think that focus on the highest level construction is going to be more emphasized. It remains to be seen whether AI will significantly change market efficiency. What it will do is you won't necessarily need that team of 30 people grinding through the information on Excel.
And analytics and things.
Yeah. So from that point of view, maybe it allows new entrants. Maybe it takes away some of the advantage of people that have got 1,000 analysts, and you don't need 1,000 analysts anymore. So it might change the industry. But I'm very, very comfortable, where we're coming from our corner, that providing let's call it the the dining experience, as opposed to manufacturing all the little ingredients, is still going to be 100% valid.
Your best business decision that you think you've made along the way, since you started your business?
Working with top financial advisors, not pretending that I can go and do that ourselves, not going and putting 5 guys in the office, just to sort of understand that there's almost this opportunity for horizontal integration. Now, if you're a big firm, you've got vertical integration, you've got your asset manager, you've got your platforms and custodies, you've got an advice force, or whatever. And that can be very, very powerful in a certain business context. In the independent space where we operate, where we're not affiliated with a big firm, those voluntary associations, where so people choose to work with us, we choose to work with them, we're not obliged to do anything. Working with top advisors has literally been the unlock for us. So separating these roles out, that good advice is specialized and good investment management is specialized. But how these things meet in the middle is
And the key thing was trust and knowledge of what their ability was and belief in that they would deliver. And tell me, looking back, you've got this whole journey now that you've looked back and you've looked back, there's been no regrets.
Oh, geez, I don't think, is anyone ever being honest when they say no regrets? You can, at a philosophical level, say we're the sum of our scars and, that's what we are. But in hindsight, you'd sort of say, listen, if I thought about that a little bit more carefully, I'd have done that slightly differently. I have no massive regrets. There are things that we've tried that didn't work. We started a business in Sweden. We had an office in Stockholm. We'd very, very carefully thought out why that was a good opportunity when we would take it there. As it happened, some of COVID arrives, you can't do anything about that. We had to shut that down during COVID. But I think we got rescued by the bell, to be honest. But those kind of things, you sit back in hindsight and sort of say, well, our thinking was, our thinking wasn't on, right? But was it a flaw in our thinking? Did we actually go about our thinking wrong? Or the world just didn't actually fit there? There's always going to be risk in your estimations. You're always taking risk strategically. So I can sort of point to that and say, oh, we didn't get that one right. We've launched products. We've built technology that we thought was really smart, turned out to be a bit of a lame duck. Geez, I wish we hadn't spent the time and effort doing that, but we did. And we mustn't forget there's stuff that we built that we might not have had the same big expectations that actually exceeded all of our expectations. So no massive regrets.
And tell me, you've got a very highly intelligent sister. She's also similar into an asset management company. Never thought of her joining you and being part of the business, or do you just work with the companies?
No, look, I don't see us as a family business, and I don't mean that from a cultural point of view. We feel like a family, but it's not a Brandon Zietsman business. PortfolioMetrix is so no. Geez, I think I don't know how you feel.
And tell me, your children. They're not going to come and they're going to, maybe one day they're also studying finance and things like that. You've got your kids out there. Do you think they're going to join you maybe one day?
I think it'd be, first of all, I think that the opportunity would not be there in the beginning. They definitely, need to go and find their way in the world, prove themselves, and outside the influences world. If they were to get involved in PortfolioMetrix, they'd be applying with a CV to someone else who's not me. Okay. And if anything, they'd probably face a little bit more of a headwind than than any other candidate out there. So
I love to ask these questions because we get different responses from different people, and that's why it's so interesting that your response is like it is, and I respect it.
Yeah. So I can't stand between them and any job that they want to apply for, but certainly they wouldn't be getting any inside track from their dad.
A message to a graduate that has just left varsity. Give me some words of advice for them to say they're getting into finance. What would you tell them to do? To basically to go and find a learning curve or a place to settle in and to get a job and learn as much as possible before they possibly start their own business?
Broad. Think broad. Everything we've been teaching guys is narrow. We all do CFAs and CAs, and it's all technical expertise. And if you want to worry about AI, it's going to do it for you. We're not going to need that anymore. What we come from a reading generation. We read novels, we read fiction, we read things about politics and history and whatever. And a lot of this has been squeezed out, and partly because we don't, you've read a lot about this. People don't get bored anymore. We're all so easily entertained. But I can see the successful youngsters coming in. Those are people who have engaged broadly with the world, reading context through an historical lens, a scientific lens, a geopolitical lens. Those are people who are interesting to speak to. So on the back of that, language. When we think about this AI, right? What is the superpower you need behind being a user of AI? It's the ability to arrange your thoughts. It's the ability to articulate those thoughts in a language that creates all that AI is doing is multiplying what you give it. And I do believe that we have challenges at the moment with language, with eloquence, with being able to clearly articulate what you mean. Now, if you think about it, what is AI? It's a sparring partner. It's a sparring partner. So you give it, something comes back, you respond, you retort. I think that our world, Norman, you talked about Wits, is very technical. People choose law and accounting and investments, all of which is good if you're reading books in the background. If you think the only thing you need to do is another degree and go and work for PortfolioMetrix and through osmosis learn stuff about investments, you can do okay. But you're never going to reach the heights.
No, but I can't agree with you more, because I've been surrounded from very intelligent young people when we grew up. I mean, highly intelligent. That some of them actually didn't go on to do anything except work for a salary and in a business, in a corporate world. Some of them actually still in difficult times have lost their jobs, So I think the guys that have succeeded and the people that I'm interviewing, the entrepreneurs, they've recreated themselves along the way. They reinvented themselves when things have gone wrong, and they've created businesses that I believe the top business people is going to outlive them, and the legacy will continue to grow far beyond their age. I mean, their lifespan. And you've answered a lot of those questions, and you've explained it all very thoroughly and very well, the way you've articulated it in this session. But I need to ask you, I mean, no plans to possibly list or bigger thing for PortfolioMetrix? Do you have any other kind of visions going on?
It's not top,
was it too sensitive to?
No, it's not top of the mind at the moment. I mean, so if you think about it, we don't require capital at this stage. We don't have shareholders that are anxious to realize their equity. So yeah, you can't say in the long term whether you're going to list or not list. But I think the one thing we'd be very, very careful of is to whom do we owe our trust? And we have many stakeholders. You owe trust to your staff. You owe trust to your investors. You owe trust to the advisors you work with. And you've got to be very, very careful that you don't end up getting involved in transactions that will compromise that trust. Now, I'm not talking about that from an integrity point of view, but for example, if we got gobbled up by another financial services company,
the personal touch will be gone.
Then it might be that our ethos or our, that culture, that DNA, even if it's evolving all the time, that somehow that gets lost in the process. So I think we've got to be very aware that it's the stakeholders go way beyond just the shareholders and our interests. And there's a lot of trust involved there. There's trust that we won't go and do something stupid.
And tell me, if you had to give me one word to explain your business that defines the philosophy or your business, what would that be?
Yeah, so look, I think that the first thing is we are a purpose-driven business. So we're a purposeful business. And I think that is also just understanding your position in time and space. And we had a look the other day at what we define as our perfect client, or which advisor we'd like to work with. And it's not like how much, the assets that they have under their control, or, sort of those kind of metrics. We're sort of saying, well, we are looking for problems where we can make a difference. And those problems don't mean there's something broken. It just means there's an obstacle or a barrier. There's a vision, there's an aspiration. This is what I want to do, but something's holding me back. There's stuff that is distracting me. I need to get focused. I need time. I need space to get you there. And if we can go in and we can take away complexity, we can take away those distractions and barriers. And what we trade is we give you space and focus. That for us, where we can see. Someone asked me a while ago, what is your best negotiating tactic or whatever? And I said, it's not a tactic. It's just almost like if I'm talking to you and I am 100% convinced that if I was in your shoes, you'd be taking what I'm offering. And when I'm saying offering, I'm talking about what we can do. So we have to have that conviction that coming in here with purpose means that we will change outcomes in your world. And I think that we are quite good at that. And this is good old ask the why. We'll sit in a meeting, and even if the meeting is quite operational, it's guys, just stop the clock. Let's just revisit. Why are we doing this again? How does this actually change anything? Who gets to benefit from this? And I think in a way that that introspection, that purpose, that questioning, that interrogation, revisiting, that's not one word, but if that feels like PortfolioMetrix, that would be, kind of the
you summarized it beautifully and perfectly. I mean, I will tell you right now, your disposition and the humility that you have with this tremendous growth and the path that you've been on, the business, this incredible business that you've created. I mean, in the industry, you've won so many awards and accolades in the industry of what your achievements and your team. You can be proud of your team and you can be proud of what you've created. From us, and from me, thank you for sharing those insightful the journey of what you've done. And I honestly believe, after hearing you, there's still a long journey ahead, and you're not stopping anytime shortly. And I think you're going to create something far more, even bigger and better. But thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that all with us. It's been an incredible story, and we really appreciate it. And don't stop and don't change where you are. And we wish you all the best to you and your family and the success in the future. So thank you for joining us, Brandon.
Norman, thank you. And it was obviously a great privilege to be invited here and to be here with you this afternoon.
Thank you. I'm Norman Raad, and see you on the next one. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Cheers for now.